This is my longest semi-hydroponic Trichocereus setup. And initially when I set this up, I did have some issues with the water going rancid and other minor issues, but the main fix was adding this cover, this sleeve, to prevent light from reaching the water. And I guess you would just have to take it on my word, but it has been 7 months without ever changing this water. All I do is top water, and then it'll bring the water with some nutrients down. There are some roots that are, I guess you could say, rotting, but overall the roots are quite healthy. And the main thing I attribute to this is firstly that it doesn't touch the soil. There's always a small amount of space between the soil and the water, and the water is also oxygenated through the top watering, so it'll break through the water or through the substrate and bring fresh oxygen to the water. During the hotter months, the water level goes down quite rapidly, so I always tend to try to refill the reserve based on the temperature. Now that the months are getting cooler, I won't refill as much. I'll just top water like I normally do, and the results are pretty good. I'm quite satisfied with this. It's quite plump, and it's got a nice amount of thickness and girth to the stem. This one has been harvested. I removed, I think, 18 inches to do a extraction, which failed completely, but I gained experience to that. And this one has been in the own roots and in a traditional setup, and I'd say it's pretty equivalent, but the hydroponic does have a faster growth rate. And for the first time, I had a small amount of weeping black rot. This could be a nutrient or a mineral deficiency. I'm not exactly sure on what the consensus is, but this one has been quite resilient. It has been quite resilient to this plague. I'm starting to cull some of my collection. Recently, I did another experiment for the basio isopropanol extraction method. I used a few peruvianus that I had, and those will just become grafting stock from here on. And I think I'll mainly be keeping bridgesii and I'll be keeping 2 clones of my peruvianus. This one, which is very, very blue, I recently did a bricks level test just for my continued data collection, and this one tested very high recently. It tested above 6 on the bricks degrees. I didn't test the content yet, but even if it's a weaker clone, I did appreciate the very, very blue tone it has. And I'll be keeping this one as well, which is the only one that proved to be worthwhile. It had an average alkaloid content of around 0.8 hydrochloric percent yield, which is like the average amount overall. So I'll be keeping this one and that very blue peruvianus. And then as far as the other bridgesii that I'm growing, and this peruvianus, this one was the strongest or the highest bricks level reading for my peruvianus. It tested 3.5 at the time, but I didn't have a successful measurement of the yield. But I'm pretty sure I'm just going to use this as a grafting stock as well, since overall my experience with peruvianus has been pretty dismal. So this one is going to become a grafting stock as well. I don't like the fact that it has so many spines. Some people like that. I personally don't. I grew this believing it was pacanoid, but it is what it is. And for the other bridgesii, these are I'm leaving to grow for quite a bit more, and I'll be reattempting my experiment to test if the ethylene increases the biosynthesis of mescaline and cacti. I'm allowing it to grow a bit more so I have a control and an experiment, and I want it to have more material so that the yield is easier to measure. Sometimes I use too little material, and that may just, I don't want to have another failure on my experiments, even if it's a failure that it doesn't help. I just want to make sure that it's not from a lack of material to weigh the final yield. And these are my favorite bridgesii. This one has been my favorite since the start. It grows almost no spines initially, and then it has also had consistently the highest bricks level and the highest growth using like the same growing conditions. It had the fastest growth overall, and as it matured it also showed some semi-monstrous traits, but just in general this one's my favorite so far. Hopefully it'll grow out pretty well. This one comes in maybe second place, and it's again my second highest bricks level from the seedling stage that I tested. It looks pretty average, nothing distinguishing so far. And this one is the third highest from the testing at the time. This one looks nice, again pretty average appearance. And then the rest are just from just growing out the bulk of my seedlings. Some have been tested in the past. This one was from the extreme girdling experiment, as well as this one, and just general average bridgesii appearance. And all of these pacanoids, they recently, besides having been used for the testing of the bridgesii isopropanol experiment for the extractions, they also presented the like weeping black rot on the apex. So I don't like that they have that trait. I personally just want stronger plants since I don't constantly fertilize my plants, so I just culled them from my collection and they're just going to become grafting stocks. And yeah, this one also presented the same issue. It had this on the apex. In the past they outgrew it like the other one, but I'm also cutting it. And this one I never got around to testing it, but since I'm using it as grafting stock, it'll just remain as such. This graft has been pretty slow so far, but hopefully it starts to pick up growth. And then finally the semi-hydroponic bridgesii, which is what I've used since the beginning for the hydroponic experiment. It's like basic bridgesii growth and appearance. Nothing particularly special other than the fact that it doesn't present much weeping black rot issue, and it's been almost its entire, like, I believe this is over a year in the semi-hydroponic system. Currently 7 months without changing the water, so it's almost 2 years growing, and it's going pretty well. And these were the stragglers. I removed 2 seedlings completely, and this bridgesii I think is pretty interesting. If it remains extremely skinny like this with barely any biomass, I will actually keep this, since I think that's a pretty cool trait. I'll just keep it growing for a while, and yeah, that's my Trichocereus collection. Pretty excited to start propagating this one a little bit more and seeing the yield it produces, considering it had currently the highest Brix reading, which again may have zero correlation, but I'm just collecting data as time passes to make my assumptions. And there is one more seedling that I have seed grown, and just again another traditional bridgesii traits, nothing particularly special. And I'll also be using this to just further confirmation for the side-by-side comparisons for any experiments that I have. I'll be letting it grow out. This one has been a few months. It's close to reaching the water reserve, but it still hasn't dropped the roots as low yet. And this one is a cereus spiralis. In the States a few years back, they were a little bit expensive. Sometimes they may still reach a nice price depending on the size. Here it's fairly common since it actually originated here. And this one I got at a local supermarket. It was around $3 or $4, so it's very cheap. It hasn't grown much since I got it. You can see the amount of growth by the shade, but this should be the spiralis, and I just think it's a very attractive plant.